Today's show is sponsored by the ABV Network Merchandise Shop. Pick up your logo merchandise by heading over to abvnetwork.com, clicking on Shop, and start filling your basket today. We are also sponsored by the Bar to Go. The Bar to Go offers a fully customizable carrying case that allows you to take your favorite distilled spirits or cocktail ingredients with you. Whether you're looking for something for yourself, a customized gift, or logoed items for your business gift shop, the Bar to Go can help. Check them out at thebar2go.com. That's the number 2 in the Bar to Go. Don't forget our friends at Neely Family Distillery now ship their unique distilled spirits directly to you. To order yours, simply call 859-394-3258. Tell them the ABV Network sent you. And now, on to the show.
Let's drink!
Welcome to the Bourbon Daily, the podcast about everything bourbon delivered to you every day of the week. Today on the show, we complete the 12th and final round of our Summer Smash, Bourbon Survivor. My name is Steve Akeley. Please join me in welcoming my special guests, Nate Weingar, Luke Otero, Robert Licorice, and Will Whitfield. Hey, gang, what's going on?
What's up, everybody?
Hello.
Greetings.
This is it. So this is the last of the regular season. Then we have one more week, actually, next week, where we'll come back next Saturday, and we'll have the 12 show winners compete against one another to determine what is the coolest thing of 2021 in the world of bourbon. Before we get to that, though, we have to talk to Nate, who's left. He had a question for the group. Okay, I thought it was just, he didn't want to ask his question, so he just left. He just runs out of the room. What did you want to ask everybody, Nate?
All right. So I think there's two teams that are coming out of COVID right now. I think there's the team that actually took the opportunity when they were at home and not going into the office to do like exercise, elliptical. I know those the Peloton, or I can't even say it, Peloton, those bikes, and I had a lot of friends that came out pretty ripped out of COVID. That's all they did. They kind of focused, they were bored, and they worked out. And then you have people like Team Nate that watched a hell of a lot of Netflix, drank a whole lot of whiskey, and ate way more than they should have, and now are paying for it as we get back into civilization and we're removing masks and people are seeing how fat ass I actually am. So
like, that mask has been covered in extra.
Yeah, it's like people didn't know it was me. They thought it was just some big fat guy walking around, but now they're like, "Oh shit, that's Nate." But not for real. I've gotten back on the train here and been working out this last month. But I'll tell you, so I'm definitely team fat COVID. So I'm just curious what everybody ended up with, if it was one or the other. And looking at you all, I'm just going to say, pretty much team fat.
When I was a kid, my dad was a big guy too. So my dad was a big guy, and I guess he hadn't seen he's a policeman, and he hadn't seen a guy. I guess the guy left the department, hadn't seen him for many years. And we run into this guy randomly at the hardware store, and the guy says to my dad, which I think is incredibly rude, but also incredibly funny. He says, "Larry," he says, "Oh my God," he says, "you look like a guy that ate Larry Akeley."
That's nice.
I mean, that's brutal, isn't it? So yeah, I might at this point look like a guy that ate Steve Akeley coming out of COVID. So So
well, I will say I'm gonna double down on increasing my bourbon intake. I also do cooking and catering and barbecue. So I am team fatty right now. So all those years I was at the gym and exercise, just getting back into it now. It's like, this sucks at 40 plus years. I'm not going to say it, but
when we get older, it gets harder. So
it gets harder, man.
Luke, we're podcasting. We can only see kind of shoulders on up. Are you ripped at this point, Luke? What's going on?
I can see those arms. So go ahead.
Is Luke shredded?
I'm proud to announce that I've dropped 30 pounds since.
There you go.
Oh man, team in shape. Team in shape for Luke. We got an in shape. Good job.
We got an in shape guy.
Well done,
the good news is, it was just all exercise, because I didn't stop my drinking. I mean, hell, I sent out Steve, I don't know if you remember, I sent out a text message the first week in the pandemic, try to guess how many bottles of whiskey I have, and I had over 252 and then 6 months into it, I was already down to 190 bottles. So the drinking didn't stop, but the exercise increased.
That's good.
Good job.
That's a good thing.
Good job.
You can't go wrong with losing weight. You feel better. It's good for your everything for your health, including just
that's outstanding, man. That's a big accomplishment. Well done, man.
Yes, it is, brother.
All right, Robert, the youngest of the group. What's going on with you during COVID, man?
I mean, so I got married during the COVID. I guess I got married back in October. So
congratulations.
I was successful in the early part to losing 35 pounds. And then post getting married, we adopted a puppy, and I have since gained another 35 pounds. So I have bounced right back to where I was before it all began. So
that happens.
Maybe losing it again. I don't know. So.
Robert, I like how you just blame getting fat on a puppy, dude.
The puppy. It's a puppy's fault.
Definitely her fault. 100%.
It's a puppy's fault.
It has nothing to do with my weak will. Nothing.
Don't worry about it. It's good. Stick with that. Don't go. Stick with that. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All
well,
right.
Steve saw me back in March 11th, 2020. We were together in New Orleans, and man, we did it up at Felix's. Man, we ate, drank, and then I got the hell out of there. I haven't seen Steve since, but yeah, I'm glad everyone is healthy though, and we got to get the reset button, Nate. So good question.
Yeah,
yes,
my wife set that reset button, like I said, about 4 weeks ago. So she got me right after this show. I'm out to the trail. So, but you inspire me, Luke.
There's the puppy that caused the weight.
There's the corporate of that. Yeah.
Yeah. Puppy caused all that. So that's 35 pounds right there. All right. What is everyone drinking? Let's start this time with our friend Luke. Luke, what do you got?
All right. In honor of Will, and I'm going to do some Willet.
All right. Willet. Okay.
Pot Still Reserve. So.
Okay.
Ooh.
It's a definite different sound.
Yeah, that has some substance to it. Right?
Yeah. Okay. So that's our lead. Could be tough to beat. Robert, what do you got?
There you go, Will.
I'm going to lose the cork pop because I'm actually going off of a ABV tasting bottle is actually what I'm drinking right now, and that is going to be State 38 straight bourbon whiskey 90 proof.
Okay. So, there you go.
So this is
that's the screw top.
The bottle.
Yeah. All right. I've got Stumpy's Old Monroe. This is a barrel pick locally. If you know Schnucks, big grocery chain here, they are big liquor buyers. In pretty good with Adam. This is a wheated bourbon, and the name of the pick is Wheat Incarnation. So here we go. Probably not enough to knock off Mr. Luke. So it was decent, but just not quite enough. So Nate, what do you got?
So I am going with quality over cork pop. This is actually a twist off. It's not actually, but this is the Heaven Hell 85th anniversary bottle that was actually a gift from a good friend named Bernie. And,
good.
They got a guy that works for named Bernie Lubbers. It's so weird that two people named Bernie. Yeah. It was him. Okay.
I heard of a comedian one time named Bernie. But
right. Yeah.
This guy was into horses, so I don't know if it's the same guy.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, here's where we're at. Luke has the lead. You heard what he was throwing out there. So can you beat that? You
stole my thunder, Steve. Because I was getting
Stumpy's.
You stole that. This is a bottle I got from a good friend of mine by the name of Steve Akeley. He sent this to me. As you can see, I've been working through that.
Yes, that's good.
This barrel name is Righteous. It's a rye. We had a show, and I was telling him how much I love rye, and this showed up at my door later. Thank you, sir. I'm not planning on beating anybody because it's empty, but
okay, not enough.
No.
Luke wins it. Luke wins the cork pop. So congratulations, my friend. Take home on the last
Cheers,
show.
Everybody.
Cheers.
All right. What we'll do next, we'll take a quick break. And then when we come back, it's time for round 12 of Bourbon Survivor. We'll do that in just a few. Hello, this is Steve Akeley, owner of the ABV Network, and let's talk for a moment about our sponsors, the people that make this show happen. First up is our friends at Moonshine University. In 2017, I completed my Executive Bourbon Steward certification at their office in Louisville. The information I learned through lead instructor Colin Blake and their team there is something that I continue to draw upon frequently in my role at the ABV Network. It truly is the standard of establishing a benchmark of knowledge of the bourbon industry. From history to production to brands and people, it's all there. Check out their full listing of programs, including Executive Bourbon Steward certification, production classes if you're considering starting a distillery, and much more at moonshineuniversity.com. I also want to talk about Neely Family Distillery. Back in May of 2018, I met Royce Neely at Limestone Branch's Craft Bourbon Festival. It ended up not only being the start of a great friendship, I started to truly learn about what makes craft whiskey so amazing. You see, I had been a bourbon drinker for over 30 years at that point, and like many people who had been drinking bourbon a long time, I was hard-coded into thinking big bourbon was where it was at and craft was on a journey to get there. Spending time with Royce and learning the things he does to make his whiskey taste better started to really get me to appreciate how things like sweet mashing, open top fermentation, pot distillation, and the grains you are using not only makes your product taste better coming off the still, but also out of the barrel as well. I still love heritage brands and they make up a bulk of my collection. But when you find a craft distiller that is truly dedicated to the craft of distilling, you are drinking some of the best whiskey out there on the market today. That's exactly what's happening at Neely Family Distillery today. Check them out on the web at neelyfamilydistillery.com, or better yet, stop by and see them at their distillery in Sparta, Kentucky. And now, back to the show.
Hello, this is Matt Rainey, and you are listening to the Bourbon Daily. One day when I grow up, I'm going to grow a big boy beard, just like Colonel Steve.
All right, everybody, welcome back. We're playing Bourbon Survivor. This is the last round of the regular season, completing season number 4 here of Bourbon Survivor. The idea is we'll pick out 2 things, and we will decide which is cooler. That's what you guys have to determine. It's not which is bigger contributor bourbon. We don't do that because it would be pretty obvious. You know, you pull out, I don't know, Jimmy Russell versus anything, and if it's bigger contributor to the world of bourbon, he's going to win. So we say cooler, which is very subjective. So this is the first round. This is going to be a tough one. This is really, really tough. What is cooler, Old Forester, the distillery, or George T. Stagg, the bourbon? The BTAC Collection George T. Stagg. Round number 1, Nate, you're first. What is cooler? What do you think is cooler, Old Foe or George T. Stagg?
Old Foe.
Old Foe goes up 1-0. Will, what do you think?
George T.
George T. Stagg. He answers correctly. Next up is Luke. What do you think? Nate got it wrong, so let's say not trying to stir the push the audience anyway. But Luke, what do you think?
Anybody in their right mind would know that George T. Stagg's cooler. So
yes, George T. Stagg. All right, Robert, what do you think? Old Forester, the distillery, or George T. Stagg? What's cooler?
Steve, first and foremost, distillery's super cool to begin with. But also, have you met Jackie Zykan?
Sure. I mean, St. Louis.
Please, how could you not go with Old Forester after that? I'm just throwing it out there.
Oh, he got personal with this one.
Yeah, Robert makes it tough. He brings up a very good point. I mean, there's so much more to a distillery than a brand. I mean, they have cool tours. They've got cool people. They've got a great history. The first to bottle bourbon, and sell it that way. I mean, there's so much there for Old Forester. And, this thing of it not being cool and then suddenly being cool. And that's really what's happened with Old Foe. I mean, you go back 10, 12 years ago, it was your granddad's bourbon. It wasn't anything that anybody was drinking because that was an old person's drink. But now it's kind of trendy, cool, and hip. That being said,
Steve, you can find 1920 on the shelf.
You can
go walk in and find George
there's a lot there.
No.
But George T. Stagg, in my mind, is the king of bourbon. That's the best one. That's as high as it gets. It comes down to me to that. And man, I love George T. Stagg, and I'm going to get my vote. So that means Old Foe gets eliminated in what is a shocking thing to a couple of people on here. So
disgusting, Steve. It's disgusting.
you know, if it would have been what's cooler, George T. Stagg or Jackie's Icon, I was going to tell you, Jackie.
I would have had to go Jackie. I would have gone Jackie.
Different.
Yeah, it's different. All right.
Yeah.
So we're going to put this idea of bourbon and a brand to a test versus people, but it'll be interesting to see. George T. Stagg Bourbon or Brad Boswell, who is the chairman for Independent Stave Company. Obviously, the world's biggest barrel company, second generation to run that business, maybe third generation, multi-generation family running that. Brad Boswell is a good guy, Kentucky Bourbon Hall of Famer. So what or who is cooler, George T. Stagg, the bourbon, or Brad Boswell, the man? Will, you're first.
George T.
T. Stagg.
Let's go with it. I understand the Hall of Fame. Let's just stay with George T.
George T. Stagg goes up 1-0. Luke, what do you think? George T. Stagg or Brad Boswell?
Yeah, I understand the importance of Independent Stave Company, and if it would have been Andrew Weebrink and George T. Stagg, my friend Andrew would have got it. But
right.
George T. Stagg.
George T. Stagg is up 2-0. Robert, what do you think? George T. Stagg or Brad Boswell?
I have to be completely biased on the answer to this because I have commercial interests. So I'm definitely going to choose Independent Stave Company is the greatest barrel making company in the world. I appreciate them.
He wants to make sure he doesn't get cut off. Yeah. I get it. Okay, so Brad Boswell gets a vote there, but Nate, you're next. What do you or no? Actually, I'm next. Nate, you'll be the tiebreaker if needed, but you're not going to be needed. You can rest. George T. Stagg versus Brad Boswell. I like Brad Boswell. Cool though, not as cool as George T. Stagg, the bourbon. So I'm sorry, Brad, you are eliminated. Next up, two brands. Well, a brand versus an individual SKU, if you will. George T. Stagg, the bourbon versus Angel's Envy. Round number 3. Luke, you're first. This is
George T. Stagg.
Yeah, this is an easy one. George T. Stagg goes up 1-0. Robert, what do you think?
Wes is a wonderful person, and his father was a wonderful person. But yeah, no, George T. is going to take this one. I can't even argue that one.
Yeah, this to me is a no-brainer. I mean, Angel's Envy, great product. It certainly deserves to be out there, but George T. Stagg is definitely cooler. All right, round number 4. What do you think is cooler, George T. Stagg, the bourbon brand, or the Silver Dollar, the famous bar, Louisville bar, bourbon bar, the Silver Dollar? Robert, you're first. George T. Stagg or the Silver Dollar?
I mean, the Silver Dollar is a historic bar in Louisville, Kentucky. But when you look at the impact of the overall bourbon community as a much larger concept, George T. is going to carry the day to me on that. Between that and Stagg Jr., George is doing a few pretty cool things. So
yep,
give that.
I mean, I enjoy going to the Silver Dollar. I like chicken and waffles and then drinking bourbon, but George T. Stagg is cooler. I mean, come on. George T. Stagg is one of the all-time greats. So I say George T. Stagg. Nate, what do you think?
Yeah, you know what? 2 weeks ago, I was sitting on the patio at Silver Dollar having brunch. So I definitely visit there anytime I go out to Louisville and enjoy. They're slowly getting back to full operation, which I can't wait because it's nothing better than going in there and crushing a bunch of their single barrels. But I agree with Robert on this one. Like the way I'm answering these is more about bigger, larger impact. And so in this case, George T. Stagg probably, but I recommend definitely going to the Silver Dollar if you ever go to Louisville.
Okay. All right. That means George T. Stagg moves on. So what is cooler, George T. Stagg, the bourbon, or the act of being at Maker's Mark and dipping your own bottle? You have the ability after the tour's over to dip your own bottle in wax. Maybe if they're not looking at you closely, you can do a slam dunk. It's up to you. What is cooler? I've dipped a couple bottles over the years, and it's a cool thing. I'm not as good at it. It looks so easy on the tour. and it's harder to do to get it right, because I've always been trying to do it like I see it on the shelf, because I want to see what's involved in that job. So rather than doing something crazy or dumb, I try to do it like if I was working on that line, I want to do it the best I can. And it's never as good as what they do. So, but George T. Stagg, the bourbon, the brand is cooler. I'm going George T. Stagg. Nate, what do you think?
Steve, the only wax dipping I do is when I get a pedicure. And, and that's to just take care of my ugly, stinky feet. And I do.
Oh my God!
That.
How would you like that job, Robert? Say you're getting a little part-time work. You're working at a place, and here comes Nate to get his feet done. Are you reconsidering your career choices?
1 billion %. Yes.
No,
Thanks,
me
Robert.
too.
I do tip well. So
Cash is cash. Money is money now.
I can be bribed.
I know the trauma I caused, so I know there'll be therapy that's needed afterwards. But yeah, I've been to Maker's Mark, and when I'm going there, they'll really, to be honest with you, I know the wax is kind of iconic, but that's really not the thing I'm thinking about when I'm there. It's just a beautiful campus, but I'm all about George T. Stagg on versus that. So.
Stagg goes up 2-0. Will, what do you think? George T. Stagg or dip in your own Maker's bottle?
I have never been to Maker's, so I'm going to say this is like one of my bucket list items. So I'm going to say that's way cooler right now because I've had George T., but I've never been to Maker's to dip my own bottle. I'm going with Maker's on this one.
Maker's,
got to do it.
Maker's has life in this game. Luke, what do you think?
Well, I love the gals at the Maker's wax line, but George T. Geez, without a doubt.
All right, that means George T. moves on.
I will say, Steve, though, if you said bass fishing at Maker's Mark or George T. Stagg, I'm all about the bass fishing at Maker's Mark.
I've done that. Have you done that there?
I have not. I know you did it. I've heard about it.
Yeah, it's
a lot of people talk about it. I'm just waiting
for your chance to do that. Yeah,
sir.
Okay. All right. Next up is round number 6. Nate, you're going to be first. What do you think is cooler, George T. Stagg bourbon or bourbon history that's shared on podcasts? So there's a lot of historical stuff that's associated with bourbon. What do you think is cooler, George T. Stagg or the history shared on podcasts?
Yeah, this is easy for me. I'm really anti-podcast. So
as he records a goddamn podcast right now.
Especially one that Steve's in charge. No, that's interesting because I think there's so many podcasts out there. Obviously, I mean, what's the bigger impact? I guess podcasts, how much audience they reach nowadays and all the information. I don't know if all the information out there is accurate on some of those, but I mean, if it's Michael Veach running a podcast, I guess that might be a little bit different than somebody else, but I don't know, So I'm going to say George T. Stagg.
George T. Stagg. Will, what do you think? Bourbon history shared on podcast or George T. Stagg?
Personally, I'm not here without podcasts. I'm not here. I don't have that depth of for love for bourbon without a podcast. That the history between me and you, Steve.
Sure.
Going back to the first interview on that. So I'm gonna go with the history of podcasts because it's reaching boundaries that people might have misconception. Even with false information out there, it's really drawing in a whole new crowd. So. Although George T. that's the pinnacle, podcast is now reaching where before you couldn't get to actually have an appreciation for bourbon.
All right. Luke, what do you think? George T. Stagg or bourbon history shared on podcast?
Well, if the history that was shared on podcast was consistent and accurate, I would say podcast. Unfortunately, and I'm not going to mention any names, but there's probably less than 2 or 3 that are worthy of that. And unfortunately, I think they give the industry a bad rap in many cases by giving reviews and telling you what to drink, what not to drink. I really appreciate the openings of the industry and this, that, and the other, but let's be accurate. So I'm not going to go with podcasts. I'm going to go with George T. Stagg.
Stagg's up 2-1. Robert, what do you think? Bourbon history shared on podcast or George T. Stagg?
And if you ask me the question of what's more important to me, at the end of the day, history and the true history of how things progressed, where things came from, how things were developed. I think at the end of the day, those are the things that stand the test of time that are really important, more than how something tastes or how rare something is. To me, that it's really the culture that's been developed. I mean, again, it's one of those great things about Uncle Nearest, that bringing to light the history of bourbon and something that hadn't been heard, and that's something that's coming forward in the last even just few years that most people didn't know about. And the more that we can spread the knowledge and the history of, again, of all fermentation, of where bourbon and where all of our other distilled spirits come from, I think that's way more important historically. I think it's way more important culturally to how we develop as a nation, how we develop as a culture. And to me, anything that's going to help spread that knowledge or help develop that knowledge or help bring things to light that would never be brought to light normally, I'm always going to be in favor of, because at the end of the day, to me, that is, again, family, culture, all that is the most important thing. And that's what I want to see celebrated and I want to see pushed forward. And I think that's, in a divided time that we live in, the thing that can bring people together more than anything else. So for me, it's going to come to knowledge and come to spreading history and true history. Again, with the caveat that it has to be accurate history, which again can be debatable sometimes. So for me, I'm going to go with true history. Bringing that forward is and a celebration of all the things that we enjoy. So.
Yeah. I'll say this. Robert brings up very good points, and I 100% agree with him. The unfortunate side, though, what it takes to do a podcast, a computer, and a plan. That's it. $15 a month, you can have a podcast, and then you can say whatever you want. And there's so many of them. And so many of them aren't accurate, and mostly it's just a little side gig. It's people having fun, which there's nothing wrong with that. And go and listen to what's out there, find the good ones. Hopefully you land on us and you say that we're part of the good ones. But yeah, I think there's too many bad ones out there because it's just too accessible. And I'm going to go say that the brand is more important. I'm going to say that George T. Stagg has a more important role and draws in more people to bourbon because it is such a high profile brand. All right, now round number 7. Here's where it gets interesting. George T. Stagg, the bourbon, versus Bill Samuels Jr. Nate, you're first.
Sorry.
Ooh, I have to go first on this, huh? All right. I don't know. I was going to say on the last round, Robert, you almost talked me into changing my mind. I was so stoic of a speech.
It was good.
I was like, dang, I started hearing presidential music in the background. Up, man. All of a sudden, it made me want to go download like 700 podcasts. Let's see here. Man, ooh, that's a I'm going to go with the man over the
Bill
brand.
Samuels Jr. Bill
Yes, sir.
Samuels Jr. goes up 1-0. Will, what do you think? Bill Samuels Jr., Maker's Mark, or George T. Stagg, the bourbon? Oh, Will, you're not on.
And here we go. Start over. I was going to go with George T. on this one. I get it. The person on this case, and just putting it in a vacuum, right where we're at with this, that brand is going to resonate more. And I appreciate the person, but that brand is more important at this moment.
Okay. All right. That means Bill Samuels Jr. is up 2-0. Robert, what do you think?
Oof, for me, it's going to come back to Bill Samuels. I think when we start talking about his contribution and again, pushing that weeded profile to the forefront, when we really talk about the revolution and the resurgence of bourbon, it is based on those weeded profiles. And it's those weeded brands that really carried everything forward. Again, you're talking about your Pabby, you're talking about Makers, and obviously Bill Samuels is that big person at Makers and one of the ones that really carried it forward, that I think saved bourbon and really brought it back to what it is and what it's going to be in the next 5, 10, 20 years. I think it's a lot based on that wheated profile and what Bill Samuels did to kind of promote that wheated profile to kind of a wider mass audience. When most people couldn't get Pappy, that was one of the things they could get, and it is that representative of that style of bourbon. So.
Bill Samuels did about everything right. I'll say that. I mean, he worked hard to getting it as the well bourbon for so many places, and that really put him on the radar. So, and of course, the Wall Street Journal article, you ever read how that went down? And really, he was a guy orchestrating that whole thing. He saw how to make that happen. He made it happen, and then it ended up being bigger than they could have even imagined. And not only big for Maker's Mark, but big for the industry. So yeah, he's a titan when it comes to the industry. So that means Bill Samuels Jr. moves on. Luke, you're going to be first this next one. Bill Samuels Jr. versus Blanton's Gold. Blanton's Gold. What do you think? I mean, he just knocked off Stag. Can he knock off Blanton's Gold too?
I'm not going to discount anything Bill Samuels has done and his family at all. But I have got to go back to the history of Blanton's and their contribution with, with Elmer T. Lee and Freddie Johnson's grandfather picking out the Blanton's barrels. To me, there are a lot of key moments that turned this industry into where it's at today, but that was one of the key ones. And so I'm going to go with Blanton's Gold.
Blanton's Gold goes up 1-0. Robert, what do you think? Bill Samuels Jr. or Blanton's Gold?
For me, just because Blanton's Gold was not available in the U.S., to me, it wasn't part of that resurgence that you had regular Blantons. And even like here in Texas 5 years ago, that was sitting on the shelf. I really think that Bill Samuels, even before Blanton's became the item you could not purchase in this state, at least, you can't find it on the shelf. Makers is one of the things that was really building the brand of bourbon and really pushing that forward. And to me, I got to go back to Bill Samuels. So.
Bill Samuels. I always like to say that Bill Samuels is one of those guys we need to see a movie made about. I mean, a guy who drove Colonel Sanders, who was a rocket scientist, who was an intern at the White House. And it turns out that, they were all a bunch of high school kids. He was in college, so he was like too old to hang with the crowd. So they ended up moving him over to the patent office. He meets a bunch of people in the patent office, and the context that he gets, he utilizes to trademark the dripping wax. I mean, what an incredible story. So I got to go Bill Samuels Jr., one of the most interesting people, not only in the world of bourbon, just an interesting person in general. I think that he is cooler. Nate, what do you think? Blanton's Gold or Bill Samuels Jr.?
I think on secondary, even Bill Samuels wins this one over Blanton's Gold. So I'm going to go with him. Not even a close contest, this one for me.
Okay. All right. Round 10. We're getting near the end here. We're going 12 rounds. Whoever left standing at the end of that is the winner. What or who is cooler, Bill Samuels Jr. or the classic cocktail, the Sazerac? The Sazerac cocktail. Luke and I drank a bunch of those when we were in New Orleans. So, yeah. Yeah, and we went to the Sazerac bar, which is at the Roosevelt Hotel, and knocked back round after round of those. Yeah, last time we saw each other in person, round after round. It's my turn to buy. It's your turn to buy. It's So, we had some fun with that, and those are great, and they're fun to watch being made. A whole thing. So, Robert, you're first. What or who is cooler, Bill Samuels Jr. or the Sazerac, the cocktail?
My goodness gracious, this one for me is tough. Again, one, because I love Sazeracs. I think Bill was huge in the renaissance of bourbon, but what I also believe built the renaissance of American whiskey in general, it was the resurgence of the classic cocktail. And when you talk about one of the most classic American cocktails, when you go next to it, you have old-fashioned Manhattan and Sazerac, the trinity of cocktails. I got to go Sazerac. Again, my last name's Licorice too, so I'm also slightly biased. So
all right, that means Sazerac, the cocktail goes up 1-0. I'm going to tie this thing back up. I'm going to toss my vote to Bill Samuels Jr. That means we're tied here. We're knotted up. Nate, we're going to go to you. Sazerac, the cocktail, or Bill Samuels Jr.
This is actually another easy one for me. Although I agree with Robert. Like obviously, cocktails were a big part of the resurgence of whiskey. There's no question about it. But Mr. Samuels, to me, gets this one. And quite frankly, I just don't drink cocktails. So I drink whiskey either neat on the rocks or
let me tell you something. If you would have been at the Sazerac bar with Luke and I, you'd have been drinking those with us too. You would have been knocking them down. Yeah, well, he would have. He's shaking his head no, but he would have. Yeah.
All right. I might have.
Good. I'm glad he was truthful there. I feel better about that. So here's where we're at. Bill Samuels is up 2-1 over Sazerac the cocktail, but it's got life in this game. Will, what do you think?
I'm not a licorice fan, so the cocktail throws me off. So I'm gonna have to go with Bill Samuels.
Bill Samuels Jr. moves on. Round number 11. I'm going to be first. All right. What is cooler, Bill Samuels Jr. or bourbon barrel aged beers? I do love bourbon barrel aged beers. I'm famous. I love chasing some of those that come out. Good stout is good. I love Goose Island and the things they do with Bourbon County Stout. But as cool as Bill Samuels Jr., no, it's not that cool. I got to go Bill Samuels Jr. Nate, what do you think?
You know, I'm not a beer fan. I did get lucky to pick this up when I was at Heaven Hell. Now this is the reverse. This was one of those limited edition Goose Island Elijah Craig grenades. Came out with, and
that's cool. I'll take that. You want to sell that?
Well, we're gonna throw those out in our ALS annual charity with Heaven Hell later this year for our members. So
nice. Yeah. I'm not a member. I want to be, but I can't be.
Out of state, you're not going to be. But I'm going to go again. You know, I think there's obviously, being from Colorado, we have a significant amount of production of beer that's done out here. But breweries, you can throw a rock. But I'm gonna go Mr. Samuels again. I just can't cancel that out with that.
Well, here's where we're at. Bill Samuels Jr. is up 2-0 over bourbon barrel aged beers. What do you think?
As much as I love bourbon aged beer, you got to do it with Bill Samuels. This is just a far reaching effect of what it is. And like Nate was saying, the beers are everywhere, especially out here on the West Coast. And we have microbreweries everywhere. So let's go with Bill Samuels.
Okay. All right. What do you guys think is cooler? It all comes down to this. This is the last one of the season. What is cooler? Bill Samuels Jr. or age statements on bourbon? Age statements. Something that's going away quickly. What is cooler? Nate's looking disgusted. Robert, you're first. What's cooler? Age statements or Bill Samuels Jr.?
Oh my goodness gracious. I love transparency with every fiber of my being. And I believe that should always be something on every spirit. So I think for me, what's cooler, if I look on a shelf, I have to go with age statements on all products. But Bill is probably more important at the end of the day. But I'm going to go with age statements just because, like, I preach it every day, all day. So
yeah, I gotta agree with you. Age statements are nice. I enjoy that, but I gotta go Bill. So Bill goes up 2-0. Nate, what do you think?
This is an interesting one because I think age statements can be tricky on bourbon and rye. That I know that a lot of times people always fall for the trick that a older age statement is a better whiskey. But I also agree with Robert. Like, there's been, obviously there were whiskeys that were out there, Elijah Craig 12. I mean, some of these that had kind of that staple of age statement, and as the supply and demand changed, obviously that changed, and some of those blends became, and we even talked about on an earlier show with Wild Turkey, I think, and even the 101 and some of that, where it was probably older whiskey at times that was going into that. But I don't know, man. I can say that there's some of the ones that, as long as it's over 4 years, and we know that, it's to me, a 6 to 8 year bourbon can be pretty damn stellar. So, it doesn't always have to be a 12 or a bigger number for me. So I'm going to stick with Mr. Samuels on this one. Although it is important to me with age statements that I think to an extent, but not to get carried away with it.
There you go. That means Bill Samuels Jr. wins this episode, and he will compete with our finale next week. So let's set this up. Here are going to be the 12 contenders for the coolest thing in bourbon. We're not voting or anything like that, guys. But this is who's going to be competing if you listen next week. So Yellowstone. So the bourbon brand Yellowstone. Bourbon hunting. Just the act of going out and looking and searching for bourbon. Single barrel curator at Kentucky Peerless, John Waddell. Deer Hammer Distillery, our good friends in Buena Vista, Colorado. I don't know if they can be cool or not. Nate doesn't even go there. He lives in the state, so that could factor against him.
Although we've had him at events, Steve, so it's a little bit of a trip.
Also, we're going to vote whether you count the votes or not. We're still voting.
We are
in case you're wondering.
Yeah,
all right. Also in there is card games at Bourbon's Bistro. I famously run a poker game at Bourbon's Bistro. Definitely worth going to. Lisa Wicker. So she's great. Yeah.
We just got a Lucky 13 single barrel from Lisa, and we put a nice sticker on there in honor of her. So
cool.
Yeah, absolutely.
Old Crow Chessman. So classic.
Mm-hmm.
Barrel proof bourbon. So the people love their barrel proof these days. Colonel E.H. Taylor. That's a tough one. World's greatest bartender, Molly Wellman, is going to be involved in it. Someone who's very underrated, I think, Lincoln Henderson, one of the all-time greats. So you talk about some guy who did a lot of experiments. And then finally, the one that we picked today, Bill Samuels Jr. So those are the 12 that are going to be competing for the coolest thing in bourbon. We'll see who wins next week. Should be fun.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we will wrap this one up, as we always do, by talking about where people can find us. We're going to start with Robert. Robert, where can people find you?
You can always find me at ironrootrepublic.com or Ironroot Republic on Facebook or Instagram. Yeah.
All right. Nate, how about you? Where can people find you?
You can find us at 5280 Whiskey on Instagram. You can find us on YouTube at 5280 Whiskey. And you can find us on, you can't find us on Facebook, as I say. That's for our private members. You can go to our website. Again, and our website is 5280whiskey.com. And so we have some virtual events we've done on there for people to watch too. So, yeah.
Okay. Will, how about you? Where can people find you? He's slow_Mo_Q. I know he's having some internet problems. So check him out on Instagram.
I'm there now. I think I'm.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. And Luke, how about you? Where can people find you?
You can get me at Luke at SantaFeBoutiqueWines.com, Instagram at Santa Fe Boutique Wines.
All right. For me, I'm an easy guy to find. I'm at Steve Akeley on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook. I've got a website, steveakeley.com. The important website for us is abvnetwork.com, where all of our material stands. So maybe you want to go read an old episode of issue of Bourbon Zeppelin. It's out there. We do something called Bourbon People. That's out there. We do quick bourbon notes on Fridays where we talk about what's going on in the world of bourbon. Those issues are out there as well. So check us out at abvnetwork.com. If you like what we're doing, please give us a 5-star review. That really helps this show find new listeners, which is very helpful. And of course, if you want to get involved, you can do so by heading over to patreon.com/the ABV Network. That's it for today. And of course, we'll be back next week with a brand new show where we go for the coolest thing in bourbon. And we'll have a brand new show tomorrow too. So until then, take care, everybody. See ya.
Cheers.
Later.
Cheers.
Peace. Before we finish the show, let's chat for a moment about Moonshine Still Pro. Moonshine Still Pro has a full line of products to help the home distiller. Whether you just want to experiment on a small scale on the stove in your kitchen or try your hand at a bigger setup in the backyard, Moonshine Still Pro can help. They have different still offerings as well as accessories and even grains from Goldstone Mill to help you make whiskey on par with what you get from your favorite distillery. They can even assist with a DIY still project by supplying some of the parts you can't make yourself. Check them out at moonshinestillpro.com. At the ABV Network, we're lucky enough to have some great friends. Amongst those friends is the Goldstein family, owners of Goldstone Mill. Goldstone Mill is a full-service mill offering a variety of heritage and heirloom grains. Their unique approach of working with mills around the country allows them to offer you affordable shipping opportunities to meet the unique needs of your distillery or brewery. They will consult with you to ensure the grains you are selecting meets the unique flavor profiles you are looking for. If you are a home brewer or distiller and you're looking for the grains that your local distillery or brewery uses, Goldstone Mill is the place to look. Check them out on the web at goldstonemill.com. Call them at 217-254-6613 or shoot them an email at hello@goldstonemill.com.
The Bourbon Daily is part of the ABV Network. For more information or to become a sponsor, please visit abvnetwork.com. Thanks for listening and cheers.
This has been a Steve Akeley production.